You're gonna start.
Very sorry for the delay.
Looky, looky. Just checking on you.
Yep.
All right.
Are you recording, Jeff?
I believe so.
There you go.
All right. Sorry for the delays there. I'm not sure why I'm not seeing the share screen button.
Right.
It's right there in green.
Shit. We're ready to go. Sorry for the delay there.
All right,
Well, sorry for that.
no problem. All right, sorry for the delay, if anybody was joining us live. It's like Mark Rondell was joining us live, yes. So welcome to him. And welcome to this special meeting of the City of Harbor Springs, Michigan Planning Commission. Today is Thursday, January 5th, 2023. This is a special meeting that we called to focus on the zoning code. Jeff, would you like to call roll to start us out?
Absolutely. Rick Turchinski is absent. Vanessa Warren,
Here.
Emily DeBay,
Here.
Bob Thoma is absent. George Pete. Here. Bill Mulder,
Here.
Mark Bidet is absent. Barry Lustgarten. Here. Nancy Rondell.
Here.
We have a quorum.
All right, first thing on the agenda is approval of minutes, and we don't have minutes tonight because this is a special meeting. We'll catch up. And make two sets of minutes at the next meeting.
Yep.
Which is, let's just,
January 19th.
January 19th. Thursday, 5:30 p.m. like usual. And do we have any public comment or correspondence?
I have not received anything at this time. Although I will add, we have had quite a bit of interest in the changes in the topic of short-term rentals, and we did make a mention at our last meeting in December that that was going to be on the agenda for the January 19th meeting. And I have had a lot of people express interest in submitting correspondence for that meeting. So I think we're going to have probably a turnout for people there and some correspondence from people for that.
Great. All right, is there anybody on Zoom who would like to make a comment on anything which is not on tonight's agenda? We have two people on with us. If you do, you can raise your hand. There's a button to push for that. If not, we'll move on. All right. Well, for new and old business, the only thing on the agenda is zoning code review. And where we left this story, it was about a month ago. And Becca and Rader, our planning consultant, it gave us a first draft of the real meaty 2 articles of the zoning code. And we kind of worked on it live together. And then we set this special meeting to come back and to look at the changes that John and team would recommend for us. And that's what we're here for tonight. Yeah. So, John, do you want to set the stage for us or?
I can. Excuse me, I think we spent the last meeting going through the regulated uses table. And planning commission made some revisions. And then I went through and made the revisions in red. So you can see what's been either deleted or a couple of uses have been added. And I think we stopped at that. We didn't proceed into the dimensional requirements. So, I mean, I guess at this point, if the PC has looked at the revisions that are in red, did I miss anything?
Not that I saw.
I just have a few questions, but I don't want to take up a lot of time. What is the one that the regulated uses, the zoning districts, it's in red. And it's, is it 0-1 or O-1?
0-1.
What is that?
I think that's isn't that special
Yeah.
office district?
So
Oh, is that
It-
office district?
what he's proposing is we have the residential office and service,
Right,
ROS
right,
district.
okay.
And what's specifically that is
Stuff on Lake Street.
properties on the north side
Yeah,
of Lake Street.
Okay, okay,
Between roughly Windmere Pines and Hoyt.
okay, yeah,
So
I know, I
benchmark-
just couldn't figure out what that
There's a couple
was.
residential homes.
Yeah.
There's a barber shop.
Yeah, there's a barber shop.
Barber
and,
shop.
Yeah,
All the way down to
Yeah.
the end there. And it looks like we're just proposing to rename that from ROS to O1.
okay, that's fine, I just didn't follow that, maybe I missed something.
And the 01 is in your current ordinance.
Okay, okay,
So we're trying to get them to talk to each other.
okay.
Are we, okay.
Yeah. And then are we at some point going to go through and do some definitions of things like boarding houses, rooming house? We're gonna go back to that
Yes,
at some
at the
point.
very end.
Okay, and on a couple of them, like guest quarters on the second page. Does R2 not have any guest quarters allowed in it?
R2, it depends on what you have on your property.
Right, so shouldn't it be a special land use or something? There's nothing in that box. Under guest quarters for R2.
What page are
Where-
Right on the top, page 2, the very top line where it says guest quarters.
It does, so see where it says, 1A, 1B, 1C, 1E? There's the S in front of it indicating it's a special land use
Yeah, but not
request.
under R2.
R2, it might not be.
It just caught my attention. I didn't know that there wasn't guest quarters or accessory building in R2.
Some of them, and it also depends on other aspects of the structure, like in R1A, for instance, guest quarters isn't necessarily a special land use.
No, I understand that. My question was, why isn't there anything in R2? Because that means that they're not allowed. And I've not,
That's how I recall it.
Well,
And
we need
I'm
to
not sure
add
that-
either a permitted or a special
Yeah, I just-
under R2.
it should be something under R2, I think, anyway, according to the,
It says under the current ordinance,
yeah,
it says guest quarters in accessory buildings in the R2 district, provided guest quarters in an accessory building are not permitted in a two-family unit or located or constructed on a lot in the R2 district.
If there's only one dwelling unit on the
Okay.
property, they can
Then they
use their
are.
second dwelling unit as they can create guest quarters. If they already have two dwelling units
you
in an
can.
R2
Then I
district,
know.
they cannot
I
have
know
guest
that.
quarters.
But that's why I was questioning. I wasn't sure what it said, but I know that we allow them in R2 if there's only a primary on the
Yeah,
property.
it's a tricky wicket there.
So something should be addressed in this for us.
So we should put an S in
So we should put an S
I think it's
dash.
probably-
I think
an
S with an asterisk would
Yeah, I
be
think it's
appropriate
probably
because
an S.
it may be permissible depending on what your
How
primary
many
use
dwellings
already
are there?
is.
Okay.
Got it.
Yeah.
These are kind of weird, but why on, I'm on page 2 still, under state licensed residential facilities. Why are nursing homes and adult living facilities in RM a special land use, but a lot of the other ones are permitted? Is it because they're bigger facilities usually and we have to come back and ask special permission? Okay, okay. All right. I just had a few things that, a lot of them were just definitions of words that I think we need to clarify. Okay. If there's anything else.
Some of those were kind of chosen for us, like we've added that new one, qualified residential treatment program.
Oh, I know, under that, I know, those are by law, yeah, I'm aware of that. Okay. And the manufactured home parks. that's a zoning district, but it's also a regulated use. Is that correct? Okay, so it's both of those. All right. And I'm on page 2, under manufactured homes and home occupations, we don't allow either of those in RM, and we don't allow home occupations under the mobile home park either, which seems a little strange to me. Manufactured homes, why do we allow them with special land use in R1 and R2, but not R? Correct. So then are we gonna go back and talk about things that maybe we wanna look at differently in some of these?
For sure. Yeah,
Absolutely.
Okay,
you can do it now if you want.
well, no, that's not up to me. I mean, it depends how,
Yeah, I think we ought to, I think top priority ought to be the permitted uses. Let's try to get this the way we think it should be.
that's.
And let's work through lives.
Every time. I think it's important.
Yeah, so. Nancy, do you want to go back to some of those that you raised as
Oh, well,
questions?
well, I think we answered the R2 one for guest quarters. I think that makes sense to me. Read my own, and then the home occupations, I see we're gonna have a new definition of it because of everything we've talked about. But why would we not allow that in RM or the manufactured home? And
I don't see any reason why.
Doesn't make any sense
Doesn't
to me
make any
not-
sense. I would.
I would, especially in RM. I mean, I don't understand why we wouldn't.
We, in RM, no, I agree with you. If we permit single family homes in RM, then a home occupation in that doesn't seem, unless somebody has some other thoughts, why not?
Yeah.
My guess in the manufactured home park, it could be that it was not included for home occupations there because the lot sizes are so small and the homes are so close together. That might have been a reason why it was not put in there as a permitted thing. They may also have something in their organizational rules that also don't permit it. So we could potentially reach out to them and see what their thoughts are. on that. But
I would think though that if the city decides to permit it, then their own rules would oversee that, but maybe the city doesn't want to outlaw it. Especially if we're looking at a new definition for the home occupation.
that would be my guess as to why that was maybe left out.
I struggle a
Was the
little
close
bit that we
proximity of
do our
homes.
zoning code based on what people are already doing, rather than looking forward of what we want to have happen.
All right, so let's talk about home occupations. Should we give John the direction to allow home occupations in R2 as well as is it M1?
With MHP and RM don't have home occupations, even as a possibility.
Okay,
There is a special land use, but,
would people be in favor of allowing those? Allowing that?
So other location with RM zoning. And then there's the condo building as you head south on Traverse Street. Is it Hankey or Hinkey Street? There's those condos right there. I believe that's RM zoning as well.
well, I think also looking ahead, that if we decide we wanted to do some more RM zoning, would it be sensible to allow home occupation? I mean, I think we have to looking ahead to not just what's already there. It just doesn't make sense to me, especially if we're saying home occupations are people that work from home on a computer. It doesn't make sense to say you can't do that in RM.
Just because you're in an apartment or
Right.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that.
Differentiate that and people having fines come over. things
And
like that.
I don't know this new definition.
Right,
That's
yeah.
what I was
Well,
asking.
I'm sure we'll come up with a definition that probably says you can't have a whole lot of traffic or you can't have, people, 20 customers a day coming or something like that. So
I would also ask the question, at least for discussion topic. If all of the activity related to the home occupation is happening inside the home. And there's no advertising on the outside of the home, they're not getting a lot of visitors or customers there. Do we still feel the need to have it be a special land use request?
That's what
You know, if it's just me operating my law firm out of an office at home and all of my business is done online or at the courthouse. And I'm not having any signage or anything, do we still feel that we need to have a special land use discussion for that? It may be appropriate that we do.
I don't know. I mean, I live near somebody that has clients coming over and there's people parking in her driveway all the time and they're constantly going in and out of there. So, I mean, I think it should, yeah.
That it still should be
Yeah.
special, okay. Sure. Well, and there might be some situations where that's different, but it was just a thought.
Yeah,
If you feel it's appropriate to leave it as a special land use, that's fine.
especially when it's clients coming and going.
So maybe that's. what we
Maybe
can
that's-
approach is if it's
yeah.
a client based,
Yeah.
in-person business, there'll be
Yeah.
some other.
It's one thing if you're on AutoCAD and you're doing designs on a computer and you're not interfacing with anyone. And then I can imagine living in a condominium or apartment and somebody who's seen clients and they're constantly in the hallways. I can see that being a little unnerving as well.
I think it rests in the definition of what
Yes.
it is.
Yes,
So would it be all right if we put a placeholder in these two, MHP and RM, saying that we would allow home occupations, and we'll make sure that it still clicks when we do our definition?
Yeah.
I've got it. All right.
And manufactured homes, right below that, we don't allow them in RM, which doesn't really make sense to me if we allow them in R2 and R1.
You know, I made a note last time we said that neither of these is actually a use.
right.
They're, a construction method or
Right,
whatever.
we got rid of the condo for that reason.
Yeah,
And I'm fine with that. Because it isn't a use at all. It's just the way the houses are built.
It's a home. It's a
Yeah.
prefab
It's a
home,
prefab home.
right?
I think
I don't
my
know.
guess is a lot of communities, especially in the seventies, when manufactured homes did look specifically different, included them to say where they should be and shouldn't be, so that they didn't get manufactured homes that look more like trailers in neighborhoods that they.
So they didn't
prefer not
like
to
take
see
away
them
from
in.
the historical character or something like that.
Right. Now, I think manufactured
That's the case
homes
more.
are much different in design and style, more typical. I think a lot of times you can't even tell.
You
the
can't even
difference
tell
between-
once they're up.
Yeah, a lot of times they're just panelizing walls and bringing whole walls and.
Or
just building them
cubicles
outside,
even, yeah. I don't even think we need this.
so do people generally agree that those two manufactured homes and manufactured home parks are not a use, and that
Yeah.
those can be deleted?
Manufactured home park
Parks is
is a
different,
use.
yeah.
though.
Well, but we have a zoning.
But we have a zoning for that.
We've named the zoning district the same name, but a manufactured home park where you have an actual licensed mobile home park.
Yeah.
That
Alright.
is a use,
I get it.
and we should keep that.
Okay, so let's strike manufactured homes then. As a use completely. Great.
So then if somebody wants to buy one of those cargo things and bring it on in,
A
Shipping.
container?
Yeah. you know, that range, is that,
I think we should get
Okay.
I think we should get into discussion about that when we start talking about, we have another section where we talk about style and design of homes.
is that where
And
we
that they
would
need
talk
to
about
keep
it?
up with the character of Harbor Springs.
Okay,
We haven't really defined what the character of Harbor Springs is. And I think that when we get to that part, we should come up with some design ideas of these styles of homes are okay and these styles of homes aren't. And that we can address shipping containers there.
okay,
Because that's where we can get into it is in, style of things or construction materials. Is where that should be addressed.
Are we able to do that without a historical society
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
We already do a great example would be signage,
Okay.
right? We can't dictate what's on somebody's sign, right? Whether the sign says Bubba's Burger Barn or whatever.
Style of the
But the
sign.
style of the material that it's made out of, right? Whether it's, do we want to allow paper signs or metal signs or plastic? Or do we want to allow signs that are this size or this size? Those are things that are within our bounds to dictate, as opposed to the content. And I think that that's something similar here. We can certainly dictate if we want to get into that material of home construction. And, as we haven't now, I think that leaves the door open where someone could theoretically build a shipping container home in Harbor Springs if they wanted to. And if that's something that Harbor Springs would like to not see, then we should specify that that's not an
Yeah,
acceptable.
well, I mean, I'm just
building.
trying to, in the spirit of what they did here with the seventies and the manufactured homes. And there's just new things out all the time. I mean, people are living in tree houses, people are living in cargo containers. And I think that, though they didn't have the vision back then of what it could be. Is that maybe why the manufactured homes was there? So you needed, a special use in R2 and then all of those R1s. And it was permitted in the mobile home park. I mean, maybe if we need to be thinking about the things that could be coming down, that people might be living in. I mean, I get it. It's not a use, but I think that's what they were trying. Or maybe we just get rid of it. We just talk about it in the others. I don't.
I think there needs to be some protection of the style, kind of what Harbor Springs is, so I mean, I agree with you.
Okay. Okay, we'll get into that. I'm not totally convinced we ought to be regulating style, but maybe building materials is where to figure out that. But I look forward to that discussion.
So
All right.
on page 3, just a couple, charitable institutions are only allowed in the transition zone with a special land use. Where did that come from?
Your ordinance.
I didn't write it. Is that because Little Trevor's Yacht Club is there? Is that a transition zone? Am I in the right zone? Is that what that?
TR.
Or is that the Dyslexic Institute up top? I mean, we zoned according to what's there and it kind of drives you. So.
I don't know that those are good examples of charitable institutions.
No, they're not.
So
What the dyslexic
we-
people charge.
Yeah, well, and the yacht club, that is a club. And we
Okay,
have
so
we
that's-
have a separate definition that they were, or use that they would fall
Right,
into.
which is the same thing in transitional private clubs.
Yeah.
Lodges and fraternal organizations. I think we have some weird things in here. Maybe.
Take them out. I mean, a charitable institution could be in an office district. Could be downtown.
Could be downtown.
Yeah,
It'd be
why
a
do
great
we-
place
I
downtown.
I have no idea.
I don't know why I'm looking at you to explain.
Charitable
It
institution, I think, is
doesn't make sense.
more a form of ownership as opposed to a use,
Okay,
right? And a perfect example is the movie theater downtown filed the appropriate paperwork. They are a charitable institution for property tax purposes.
are they in the transition zone?
No, they're in the central business district,
So,
but their use was a movie theater.
right.
So, and I think that's maybe where charitable institutions shouldn't necessarily be viewed as a community use and more of a form of
Something.
how
It
they've
doesn't-
chosen to structure their business model. or
Yeah, it just doesn't work for me when I see these kind of off
Delete it.
ones.
Yeah, let's delete that one. What do you guys
Okay,
think?
Yeah.
I'm
All
good
right.
with it.
Decision made.
Good. What about private clubs, lodges and fraternal organizations? Down,
We have a few of those.
are they all in the transition zone?
They're in various neighborhoods. I think yeah, they're kind of all over the place. We have the Legion in they're in the B1 district.
Yep, Legion's not in the TR.
The yacht club, I know part of their property is in the CBD, but then the other half,
No, it's all waterfront, Jeff. It crosses the street.
So
does
why,
that go all the way back to Main Street though?
I believe so by your map.
I think the portion that's on Main Street is in the CBD.
so why do we have this in here? Why are we worried about private clubs, lodges and fraternal? I don't like extra things in the code that we don't need. Maybe we do,
That we,
but
My guess is that.
you want to expand the districts that they can be in?
That's what I would recommend,
something.
that
This
you
just-
expand the districts that they can be.
Yeah,
in.
this just doesn't work for me, that,
So we would want them where they're sitting right now is they're sitting in the CBD.
Well, a small part, the parking, like, oh, let's use the yacht club as an example.
right,
The parking lot of the yacht club is on Main Street and is within the CBD. But then they have their property all the way down on the waterfront,
Bay
on
and
Bay,
both sides of
that
Bay,
is within the waterfront
Right.
district.
right?
But then the portion of, on the north side of Bay is in the TR district, I believe,
Yeah,
without looking at a map specifically.
Yeah, it looks that way. Look,
Free zoning districts, but,
Yeah.
yeah,
and then there's a little Harley Club in waterfront or waterfront one or.
yeah.
And there's the boathouse. in the waterfront.
I just think we need to expand it or something, because
Yeah.
this doesn't
Let's
work.
expand it, but not put it in single family.
Let me-
residential.
Okay.
Let me throw out another thought, since we're talking about expanding districts or things, what districts things can be in, or potentially removing things from districts. One thing that we should keep in mind. Whenever we're removing a use, we should have a thought in our head of. Could this take a property that is in that use? And if we're removing that use from that district, we're now saying that that property is non-conforming. And if a property is non-conforming, it means that they can't add or modify that building in any way to expand their use on that property. And I guess a good example of where this has happened throughout the years is the flower shop right here on Main Street,
Okay.
right? Ages ago, when we didn't have zoning, the flower shop went in, that's a business use. Now that property is in an R2 district. And one of the difficulties that Jamie has had with that site is she's a non-conforming use. So when she came in at one point and wanted to build a small addition onto the property, she could not. She can maintain the existing building and keep it in good repair. But she cannot expand her use of that business on that property. So if we accidentally remove a use from a zoning district and say that use can't happen there anymore. We've now taken, if there is a property in that district that is that use, they are considered from that day forward a non-conforming use. The other thing that we should keep in mind also, if we expand a use into a new district, are we comfortable if more properties switch to that use? So an example would be if we expand and allow private clubs in the central business district, would we be comfortable if one of the downtown properties stopped being a retail store and became a private club? Just as food for thought on different ideas of the, I guess, looking at it as a worst case scenario, right? Not that that might be a worst case scenario, but you know, if someone chose to do this, is that something that we would like to see, right? Does that help make sense when we're talking about these things?
Yeah, and I know, I think certainly it's something we should keep in mind, but what these we're looking at, the properties that aren't in the zone that we say they're permitted.
Right.
Yeah,
And-
and then the
and-
Legion.
So
is
then we
like
allow
here,
them
and
to do, to be there without being non-conforming. Right? Am I right? Thinking that's right? So I don't like things that don't work. I mean, for me, that just, doesn't work.
So like private clubs, lodges and organizations, obviously we have the Legion.
The Legion's not sitting in a TR.
They're in B1.
What about the
They're-
depot, the restaurant?
The depot is that
That's just-
in a waterfront district, I think. Do you have?
On the map,
Yeah.
Hey, I would like that, thank you.
I think minimum we ought to do is just check off the districts where clubs already exist today. And let's keep them on there as a use.
And we can make it a special land use if people are more comfortable, so it's not nomadic.
Right.
you know,
I mean,
so they
or
have
else,
to
you know,
come.
what could happen is that then a bunch of those clubs pop up somewhere and they're getting dangerously close to the residential.
Great.
I was curious too, I know it says private clubs, lodges and fraternal organizations. Are there not any women's organizations? Should we?
I think fraternal usually.
Does it mean both? Oh, it does. I didn't know that sounds like a male sided.
You don't think so? Okay, we can do grammar and.
Right, a fraternal order is
It's male.
male.
Fine.
We might be welcomed now, but at one point we were not.
So I thought it would be
Like
nice to have. both.
fraternities versus sororities.
Correct,
We're not.
correct.
Yeah.
Like the Elks is the Elks and the women, they have the cows with the Elks groups.
No, no.
Yeah.
Really?
I didn't know that either.
Well,
So it'd be
then
nice if
let's-
they had both.
What do we? what do we
Let's
do?
remove some exclusive language.
So are we thinking of it?
Why don't we say just
expanding-
membership organizations?
Yeah, why do we have
Yeah.
to?
Yeah,
Instead
like
of
so it's
fraternal.
all inclusive.
Private membership or
Yeah.
something like that.
Thank you.
I think it's probably, they did fraternal order because so many of them are fraternal order of the Eagles.
Yeah.
You know, things like that.
But
It's
that's-
right in their names, I think.
Really not
Yeah, I think
proper
membership
language anymore.
organizations.
Yeah,
Or private membership.
organization.
Well, we're thinking of expanding what districts they're in, but through special land use.
Yeah.
Is that what I?
Yeah.
Yes.
We could do a little bit.
And Jeff, can you pick those out for us then and tell John what districts to include then?
Yep, we can
Based on-
certainly look up where some of them are and
Great.
be great.
Good, thanks. That's
Yeah.
a good catch. All right, what else is on people's minds?
I'm glad we expanded the parks,
Mhm.
public parks into a whole bunch of new zones. I think that was a good thing to do.
Yeah.
Um, Again, why don't we allow religious institutions in RM when we allow them with special land use in R1? Same thing for the manufactured homes. I'm just curious why we singled out those in transition. B2, just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it makes sense to me if they're allowed in R1
Why wouldn't we allow them in RM?
with special land.
With the same.
How do people feel about that?
Yeah, I think that's good.
Your gut on that? Okay, makes sense.
Not gonna end up with a Branch Davidian compound. And
With special land.
You gotta have a special land, if you.
Okay, good enough.
Yeah, if you keep
Got
a
it.
special land, because it's just inconsistent with all the other.
Got it,
zones.
Harbor Springs version of Waco, Texas.
Nice.
I don't think that's.
All right, we're gonna talk about cafes and bakeries.
Yes, we're. What page is that on?
Page 3.
Yep.
3/4 of the way down.
Oh, they're there. Yeah.
You know, I don't know.
Yeah,
What were we gonna talk about?
We just,
yeah.
you wanted further discussion on.
We were gonna talk about the possibility of allowing those in some other districts,
Right,
like
more
small coffee
residential, yeah.
shops and some of the residential or the. Let me look and see where they are. They're in B1, B2 and CBD now.
Mhm.
And we had talked about opening that up a little bit more. I mean, that was what we had said we were gonna talk about.
Well, I don't know why they're special land uses.
You
A
know,
cafe or a bakery,
I
why are
don't
they
either.
special land use CBD or B1?
Why couldn't they just be permitted?
Yeah.
I mean, you're
Well,
changing something
what's
to
the-
maybe commercial, and things like that, so.
I think the issue was, and some of this is anecdotal, but my understanding is that in ages past in Harbor Springs, they really had stringent things in place for any business that was going to be doing anything with food. And that they've in the past years, they've expanded that, made it a little bit easier, but basically, any of the businesses downtown that have food that is prepared or served with the intention of being readily eaten on site or eaten on the street as you walk around. All of our food businesses are special land use, unless that food is packaged up where you would buy it, purchase it, and take it home with you and then eat there.
And what's the reasoning behind that?
I think it was things like making sure that food businesses like that had the proper things in place, like grease traps and
Health
whatnot.
department and
That's
building
health
codes do
yeah.
all that now. I mean,
Garbage was a big one.
Health department.
hell, yeah, I mean, that's all covered by other departments.
Well, the health department doesn't necessarily make sure that they have proper dumpsters on site that are emptied on a frequency that's appropriate for the city to control the smell, to make sure that rotten foods aren't, wasting away on a side street.
I would imagine we have other things in place that control that, though. If this is just cumbersome to have them in so many different places,
I'm just giving you the
That's
history as it
probably where
was
it
brought to
came
my
from.
attention,
Yeah.
was
sort of like justice of the peace. and-
things like
yeah.
odors, smells, things of that nature, making sure that we ask them that they have a proper plan in place of how
Well,
they're
the
gonna
city
handle
used to
that.
be in charge before the health department, right, Jeff? Didn't we just change something in the city code? Where it used to refer to the health department, that we were the health department, the city itself?
I do remember we made some changes
Yeah.
regarding when we talked about
Yeah.
downtown businesses, outdoor grilling. That we tried to get involved in where the grills could be and whatnot, or whether they could or could not. And we felt that that was something that we didn't need to have as firm a hand in, and we changed the language to say that we're just gonna let the health department determine what's appropriate or not appropriate for that.
Is what makes sense. That's their job. I mean, I think that's their job.
Well, there's two questions that have been raised about cafes and bakeries, and that is, the first question is, why do we want to still have special land use approval for a pretty benign use, pretty common? And two, do we want to allow these in other districts? If so, which districts?
How are they different from the restaurants and the eateries, which are allowed in
Those-
1,
those are
2,
special
3,
use too.
4, 5?
Yeah, I was,
But at least they're allowed in.
Allowed in 4, 5 different districts.
right. And they're all special land.
They're all
use.
special.
They're all special.
Doesn't really make sense anymore.
I don't get
It's-
that.
Yeah, it's still pretty much the business districts plus the waterfront
Yeah.
district.
I mean, a cafe, a bakery, a restaurant that's in a commercial district should be permitted.
Right.
Now, if you want a bakery that's in a transitional area or like in a neighborhood, that should be special land use, so you can
Agreed.
manage that.
I agree. Yeah, this just makes a lot of extra work for, I mean, certainly we want restaurants downtown. I mean, why would we make them jump through?
Oh, well, he has a question, but I don't understand why bakeries and cafes got singled out
I
from
don't
the
either.
restaurants and eatery establishments. I don't know why they just wouldn't be in there.
They didn't, they're all special land uses. The only difference is bakeries and cafes aren't permitted on the waterfront.
But why do we have two different categories?
For what?
Why are we differentiating between cafes and restaurants?
That's gonna come into play in the requirements that are within. For instance, we have restaurants and we have specialty restaurants. There's different seating requirements within those. There's different requirements for whether they have bathrooms available, things like that, that are in the specific requirements, and those are different. Do you want to make a coffee bar have the same seating requirement as a restaurant?
So you're saying the difference between cafes and restaurants is like the capacity or? I guess it would-
Other requirements that are within, it's not necessarily the use or thing there, but different requirements that they're subject to.
I guess it would be handy to know those when we've got lines that are conflicting to me in this. I mean,
Whenever we get to two things that look like they could potentially be combined
Yeah.
into one item, more than likely, the reason that we have them separated into different categories is because there are different requirements. The main one for, like, the other example, because I don't think it's actually cafe and bakery in the code. I think it's coffee beverage bar. I'm not positive on that. But I know that we have coffee beverage bar and what we're much less stringent on how they can operate. But there's a limitation on the foods that they can sell. They're prime on coffee beverage bar. It's more like coffee is the main product
Mhm.
or the beverages are the main product. And the only foods that go with that might be like a muffin or something
And why
small.
do we,
Why do we care?
why do we care? What difference does that make? I'm not.
I mean, that
I just-
would be like going to a Panera Bread and saying that, oh, you can only have coffee and a muffin.
Yeah,
You can't have a sandwich or a salad. It
we
doesn't
make
make
our life
sense.
very difficult when we do
Michael,
this.
I have a question.
Oh, Michael.
Something to add you?
I'm actually at the age where I've been here long enough, I might shed some light. Thank you. When I first moved here 30 years ago, there was a huge push to not allow fast foods in Harbor Springs. So this was before coffee was a thing. There was no Starbucks. It was McDonald's and Burger King. They were building in Petoskey and they did not want them here. So like BC Pizza up in the Ferry Plaza was run through the winter. Because were they fast food or were they not? And that all seemed to stem around whether you bought something and walked out with it, like you were speaking of, or whether you sat down. And I think that has changed. Everyone's view of it has changed and the business have changed. But I mean, that was a big issue in town for a while. I don't know if it was when the code was written, but
It was
there
after.
was,
but I
people were
remember.
adamant they did not want fast.
No,
food
I
in
remember,
town.
I remember that.
So I think that's where all of this comes from.
But I think,
Not that
I
it's wrong, I'm just saying that that's.
think it's time we take up.
Nancy, do you have a proposal to deal with this?
Well, I think.
Thank you, Michael. That was great.
Yeah, thanks. I think that's probably where it came from. I guess I'd like to see the definition of those things and see if we can't figure out an easier way to make that happen. Because I think to have cafes and bakeries allowed in 3 and restaurants and eateries allowed in 5, it doesn't make sense.
Right.
And I'd love to see some of this, a small coffee shop allowed in a residential area. I think there are places that would be very.
I also
appropriate.
think in waterfront,
Yeah, I think there's lots of places. that'd
and I
be
think that the
appropriate.
restaurants and eatery establishments should be permitted, not special use.
Yeah.
And the 5 that they're allowed, they
Yeah.
should just be permitted.
Well, in the CBD, if you don't permit a restaurant there, where do you permit it? I mean, without having them
Right.
have to ask permission. to
Yeah,
have a
Jeff is
restaurant.
right. You have a definition. It's called coffee beverage bar.
Okay,
And it says it prepares and sells non-alcoholic beverages, limited food items, customarily accessory, such as cookies, donuts, baked goods, and specifically excluding such items as pizza, soup, sandwiches, salads, frozen yogurt, and food items.
I think those kind of definitions are really.
And that's in the definition section.
Yeah.
If you go to the central business district section,
There's even.
we have further requirements, such as, seating capacity and some other things like that that are, and, that come into play. The one that I've questioned is, restaurant versus specialty restaurant, because really the only difference between them is the square footage of your place. There's not much of a difference between them. But if you'd like us to see where we can take some of these and combine them so we have fewer definitions and fewer choices without creating too many limitations, we can probably look through some of these.
Yeah, I'd be in favor of that. Let's,
Yeah.
homogenize as much as we can.
Yeah.
Let's, make the districts consistent.
Yeah, your definitions, I think I mentioned before, your definitions actually have standards in them. It's not just a definition, it says, like under specialty restaurant, it says it must contain at least 200 square feet, not more than 1,349. So the definition actually has a lot of standards that are attached to it.
And it should just be a
It should just
definition.
be a definition. Yeah, but that's, your definitions have embedded standards in them that make it pretty interesting.
All right, so we got a lot of work to do.
Well, if you look at the cafe, bakeries, restaurants, eateries, and microbreweries and wine tasting. Microbreweries and wine tasting is permitted in the CBD, and the other 2 need special land use. That doesn't really make any sense to me. So I think we should look at that whole eatery
Mhm.
type and figure it out.
And what's considered a drinking establishment?
And a drinking establishment is
Yeah.
another one. Yeah, where is?
All right, we got some
It's bottom
combinations.
of-
So who's the best person to lead this? The whole restaurant deep dive?
I think Jeff and I can sit down and go through it all, because there's quite a few in here.
And
Drinking,
we've got guidance from you that some of
Simplify,
these can be
combine.
taken out of special land use requirement and made regular
Permitted.
permitted uses. And yeah, I think we've got enough to go on to present some ideas of how we can.
That'd be great.
All right,
That'd be great.
everybody okay with the direction to simplify and combine where possible? Okay. All right, great.
Were
What
we
else
on
did you do?
page 4 yet?
I think we should take a look at that retail food stuff too. Maybe that goes under the same thing of what you guys were just talking about, from what you said, those come from a long time ago when we
We
had
can look at
concerns
all of the food
about the health
businesses.
department and stuff.
All right, I'll raise one. Do we really need sexually oriented businesses as a use?
Yes, and here's why.
Yeah.
If you don't have it in your zoning code at all, that the state's going to say you haven't addressed the need, and therefore somebody can put one wherever they would like to. So if we identify it in the zoning code and here and say, here's where it is permissible to put it, and here are the guidelines of what you would have to do to make it happen, we have some limited control over what somebody wants to do.
So how is that different from something else that we, if it's not mentioned, we can't do it?
If you're too limiting and say that something just can't happen at all,
Okay,
if someone appeals that to the Court of Appeals, the Court of Appeals could say, you haven't provided this type of activity within your district and you need to.
it's like your manufactured home park.
Right.
okay.
And we've got a couple of instances where that has happened in Emmett County.
Yeah.
Where the use was requested and denied, and they went to the Court of Appeals and said, you haven't provided us anywhere to put this, so we can, and the court said, so they can put it wherever they want. Walmart is a great example of that. When that first came into Bear Creek, they tried to appeal, they didn't want a box store. And then,
Yeah.
All right, anything else on page 4 before we get into manufacturing uses? All right, the note I had under manufacturing uses were to modernize and reduce if possible. And I think Michael took and was nice enough to take an action item to think about some of these uses and how they could be worded better based on what he sees in the waterfront area. Michael, do you have any thoughts yet for us on these things?
Yeah, first, I apologize for being late. Got work got in the way. And secondly, there have been changes in public comment, and I don't know how the planning commission is addressing public comment. Are you taking it only at the beginning of a meeting with the city council, or are you taking it during the meeting?
During the meeting?
I don't want to be.
well, and he specifically asked, and any of the boards always have that opportunity. If they want further comment, they can always ask.
Yeah, I see this one as more of a work session and we have a community member who volunteered to help us out, so.
And Michael did email us some information and I shared with John, so we've taken that and we're gonna.
Has the commission members, have they seen it?
No,
No. Sorry.
Well, if I might back up then, because I wasn't sure how to comment when you were discussing prior items, but on page 3, I don't know if you wanted to address the fact of municipal buildings and parking in the waterfront district. It's prevalent. So I'm not sure why it's not allowed. You have Ford Park, you have the Harbor Master Building, and theoretically, if you wanted to redo the Harbor Master Building, that there's been discussions, you wouldn't be able to do that.
Which, can you tell me what line you're on?
Yeah, on page 3, it says municipal buildings and
And
parking,
parking,
and they're not
okay,
allowed in the waterfront
Yeah,
district,
I
and that's
see
just
that.
not what.
but they're there.
but they're there, yeah,
Quite a bit,
yeah,
so.
All right, so there's a catch.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I was looking at I think what you asked me to do is the definition of a marina, and of course I expanded into 3 pages of a discussion of marinas, but in the waterfront district, depending on what you want to call a marina, and I did provide a definition of sorts, it's pretty broad because by my count, I think there are 10 marinas in the waterfront district. They start all the way over at the Harbor Point Club. They have a dock that's for use by their members. The city, the boathouse, the yacht club, Irish Boat Shop, Graham Marina, Pierce Marina, Wallstrom Marine, Ford Park. So depending on what you want to call a marina, I think appropriately, there's quite a bit of marina activity on the waterfront. I think it's all good. But I think when most people think of a marina, they think of Irish Boat Shop and Wallstrom's. So my definition of marina was more broad, which included private membership use. And you can, I guess, do what you want with that, but it seems like access to the water, private or public, is appropriate in that district. There was also on page 4, under retail, we do have retail activity on the waterfront, and it's not theoretically not allowed. And I know it was in a current code, it's sort of a special, I don't know what you even call it. It's part of those definitions of special uses. It was available if it's ancillary to the existing use, like we can have a marine store. It was limited to 3,000 square feet, and the reason for that was because we measured Wallstrom's store and we measured Irish Boat Shop store, and 3,000 square feet was the number. I think the number is ridiculous because it's not really based on anything, but that's up to you. But there is retail activity in the waterfront district. Both us, Wallstrom's, Irish, arguably the yacht club, and there may be others. And then under manufacturing, you had, I think you corrected that, right? Boathouses was pulled out of.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then it gets into, there is outdoor sales and storage of boats under manufacturing. I'm not sure that that's manufacturing. There's outdoor sales and display further up, which is something that's not allowed in the waterfront district or manufacturing. So what the definition of that is, I don't really know sitting here. And then there's private boat sales, service, and storage, which is really, I think, what I focused my definition on, trying to capture what I guess I think a marina is. Because a marina is a pretty general term. And to Jeff's comment, my responsibility here is I don't want to see uses that exist specifically for Irish Boat Shop lost without good reason. Because in addition to what you said, as a property owner, if you remove rights, generally you remove value. So the property owner should be concerned with that.
And outdoor sales and display, that was something that we actually added fairly recently in an ordinance a couple of years ago,
We
right?
did, so within the waterfront district.
And it may be that it's in a spot in the code somewhere that wasn't easily recognizable with the uses and whatnot, but I know that we did add that, and it was done through an application process administratively. So we can find that and make sure that's on here. I believe that's waterfront or waterfront 1. Waterfront, yeah.
Waterfront 1 is a really weird zone, because all you've really done is allowed private homes in the waterfront district, which is fine. They, that's what it is. It's the waterfront district with private homes.
Yeah. And I think it was because they were there and we didn't want to make them non-conformities.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, outdoor sales and display, that should be permitted within the WF district.
It was a commercial operation on the waterfront. Obviously, we're under scrutiny and we can irritate people who buy homes here. Because we have trucks, we move things, there's noise, it's a commercial operation at some level. And as much as we try to be very conscious of what we do, we don't drive on Lake Street when school's in session, all these things, that's something we choose to do. It doesn't mean the next person would. But it's my belief there needs to be some commercial activity on waterfronts. It doesn't necessarily mean it's right. We can look at waterfronts all over the country, especially on the East Coast, and it's been eliminated basically. But I would argue that an operation like ours is like a golf course, right? You might not like a golf course, but it's green space. If you get rid of the golf course, they're just going to put houses there. So The only other use for the property that Irish Boat Shop sits on right now would be one big massive home or 5 slightly smaller massive homes and a huge fence or hedge across the side. But if there's a private home on that property, nobody will ever see the water again. So the commercial uses serve multi-functions.
Or a big condo building.
Or a big condo building, but I think you currently don't allow it because of what happened.
Okay, so you define, I haven't seen it yet, but.
I'm sorry, yeah, I had sent it
Yeah.
to Jeff. and-
So I shared it with John so that we could look into how we might apply it, but
Okay.
I'll forward that to the rest
So
of
you,
the.
the way your approach though was to define the word for the thing marina, which we don't have today, is that?
Well, it says private boat sales, service and storage. So the question is, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Someone could argue that, I don't know, I don't sell fuel, but Wallstrom's does, and you could argue that we shouldn't be selling fuel. So I was a little more specific or a little more broad, depending on how you want to look at it, of what a marina operation might be. Looking at the fact that some are private clubs, some are municipal, and some are private. You can have multiple definitions. I try to do under one. That's up to you.
And I think this is where we get into
I
where
think that's what
some of these things are answered, not necessarily in the definition of the use, but more in the way that that business is able to operate in the requirements and the statutes. That it's covered there in that section as opposed to the use section.
We were challenged on being able to have office space on the waterfront. I mean, this is the experience that I'm coming from. So given the opportunity, waterfront property is sensitive. I understand that. People don't like to see things built on the waterfront. And when they are, they're looked at with scrutiny, which is great. But that's the problem with the code from my perspective of either not being specific enough is someone can say, well, you're not allowed to do that because it doesn't specifically say you can. So
Your concern was some of the things you've been
it
doing
doesn't actually say I
forever
can have a
were not-
bathroom.
were not addressed. Yeah.
Right, but
Yeah.
And I think some of the restrictions come from 80% of the waterfront in Harbor Springs is marina, basically. So I think just
or park,
protection.
yeah,
Right.
I mean, the city's done a wonderful job with green space or park too, but. It isn't just the two commercial marinas,
Right.
there's a lot more marina use. I didn't bring that paper with me, I'm sorry, so.
Your page,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm sorry, and I should have already forwarded that to y'all.
I was
who-
timely, just want that to be known.
Oh, yeah, no, I think it was like a week or so after we had the last meeting.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Michael, for putting some thought to that.
Thank you for doing this, this is a huge project. Again, I have to say, I'm disappointed I'm the only one in the office because in the audience. Because what you do affects so much of the public, but
All right, and I got another note that we were gonna have just distilleries / brewery.
Right.
In this same area.
There's distilleries under manufacturing, but they're not allowed anymore.
They have nothing, so they're not allowed anywhere.
I had them in the manufacturing district.
Yeah, in the manufacturing, they're not allowed though, right?
No, I had
Oh,
it
I'm
as
sorry, it
permitted
got added in. Thank you.
on page 4.
Got it, yep.
Yeah, I don't see anything on mine.
It's right under microbreweries and wine tasting.
In commercial uses. One
Yep.
Under, okay, and then, but under manufacturing uses, there's distilleries and if there's
Yeah.
nothing,
Oh,
Yeah,
they're listed in 2 places.
Okay, well, we'll take it out of the commercial.
I was gonna say, take it out.
And put it in
And I'll put it
manufacturing.
in manufacturing.
The
The
microbreweries,
distill.
No distilleries.
yeah, I already showed that.
Yeah.
Distilleries are in the
Yeah.
manufacturing
then-
and microbreweries and wine tasting are in.
Yeah, but
CBD.
they're-
What they want to do is, it also shows up down here under manufacturing.
Yeah.
Oh,
So they wanted P there, take it out of the commercial category.
I see.
Good catch.
hey Jeff, is there other manufacturing besides Wallstrom's and Irish? On the map, I think we're the only 2 pieces in the city.
That's it, yeah, just that area where the boat storage is. Yeah,
So in reality. none of these uses will happen there in the short term.
I mean, yeah, I mean,
there is no
the
place for
situation would have to
uses.
be that. You guys would have to, somebody would sell their property and it would be converted into, yeah. Unless somebody asked to expand and create a new, put more property into M1 somewhere.
What are central cleaning facilities?
Like the mats that we have here in the hall, there's a company that comes in, takes our old mats, put new mats down. They haul them off to somewhere, they clean them, or places that do uniform cleanings, where they would haul things away from a site, clean them at that site and then
Okay.
bring them back.
Just seems like a weird thing to be
We
comparing.
don't permit that anyway.
No.
And yeah, because of usually they have a lot of noxious
Yeah.
odors.
Right.
So
So laundromat be considered that, or?
There's another.
I think we had a separate use. of
Separate, yeah, from laundromat.
Question about why we have microbreweries paired with wine tasting.
Mhm.
Those are two wildly different things from where I come from.
From where he goes to drink.
Yeah, one is brewing beer, which would be similar to a type of distillery. I would imagine someone might want to open on Main Street in the CBD where it's not allowed. Or wine tasting, which is tasting wine and potentially making it, but usually just wine tasting or wine bar.
Yeah, those are
I
very
would
different.
Think that, yeah, I mean, that's pretty important. There are people who are opening micro distilleries all the time. I mean, I was in Lake Chanel a couple weeks ago. Place is awesome. It's not very big.
Isn't there
So,
one in downtown Petoskey?
not yet, but anyway, you see my point. I'm not sure that that grouping is,
It's not.
So we should have distillery, we already have distilleries separate. You think we should separate microbrewery and wine tasting? Wine tasting, they're generally, yeah, that's,
I can see that.
yeah, or have all three together. I mean, I think it was in here as a special land use anyway, or permitted in one section in CBD. So, I mean, we need to decide,
if you feel that they're all permitted in the same areas, we probably don't need to separate them. If you think that they should be permitted or have different regulations in different zoning districts, then we can certainly separate them.
or do we say microbreweries, micro distilleries? Then if somebody wants to open a giant distillery or a giant brewery, they can do it up the hill, or they can buy Irish Boat Shop and
They just need to create different definitions for the different, micro versus full.
Okay, I'm just trying to think like of, people who are opening businesses. That's something that people are making a living at these days. So
So what's your proposal then?
the proposal would be to have wine tasting potentially be part of it, but probably not, and just have microbreweries and micro distilleries and permitted CBD, special land use B1, I think is fine. And then where did the other one go?
The distilleries was permitted in manufacturing.
Yeah, and then I think they should both be permitted in manufacturing as well.
And wine tasting should be separate because it's just. pouring
Yeah, I don't see how
somebody
that's
12
different from a
wine.
restaurant.
Yeah,
Question though. Because typically a microbrewery, people are going in and they're sampling beer and maybe getting.
same thing at a micro distillery.
Yeah, do we want, because that intends that then customers are going and they're sampling beers and whiskeys and maybe getting some food to go with that, like Petoskey Brewing is a microbrewery.
Yeah.
Do we want a restaurant like Petoskey Brewery in our manufacturing district?
Would be great.
So that's like up
I
here.
mean, I think if people want to go there,
What would be the harm? What would be the harm?
I'm just asking a question.
So you got, in Elk Rapids, you have Shorts on 31 that's in a light industrial district, and they have an outdoor
yep,
beer garden, and they have food trucks, and it's in an industrial area.
Really?
Yeah,
Oh, I didn't realize that.
right coming out of
Right
town.
downtown.
Right coming out of town.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with that at all.
I was just asking a question.
I think that's the direction we go.
So do we need wine tasting at all as a use?
I don't see why we need that
That's a
as
public
different
restaurant.
from a restaurant.
Well, you
I
have
don't know.
drinking establishments. is that
And
it?
drinking establishments too, I think we're covered.
There you go.
So we don't think we need.
But what about wine tasting in the agriculture?
But you don't have drinking establishments in your CBD either.
And we should have.
You only have them as special land uses in the B2 and the,
Amazed to me.
or the waterfront districts. So we'd have to have drinking establishments. They should be in the CBD.
They should, and
Yes.
I don't understand the difference
I don't
really between those and restaurants, in all honesty.
Whether or not there's food served with it.
Well, but almost always at a drinking establishment, there's some kind of food. Almost always. I mean,
You have
even wine,
drinking establishments in B1 and B2?
why not?
I mean, do you? No?
Oh, now? I don't know,
Not sure
Jeff,
where the-
help me, I don't know where the line is.
The line is just all alcohol and no food?
I don't think we have a drinking establishment,
I don't
That's
think
what I was
there is
trying to
such a
restraints,
thing.
period.
And when this was written, they were common. It was a bar. You
Yeah,
had the bar and they have all these
right.
served was alcohol.
Right.
It's not today.
But it's not
Right.
really anymore,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah,
I don't think that's a
I
good.
can't think of
usage.
one.
Legion. I guess.
Yeah, they have burgers.
I don't know why we need drinking establishments in this at all.
Or if in case somebody wants to open a bar
You
that
gotta
doesn't
have
want
it.
to serve food.
You should have it.
Do you want that to be an option for somebody? Or if they're going to open up a drinking establishment, do you want them to require them to have table seating?
No. I mean, I mean, if it needs to be there, it needs to be there. It just seems really cumbersome, but if it does to
Seems okay.
protect it, then that's fine.
Well, I think it's just if you're gonna have different requirements, then you need a different use.
So like Petoskey has gypsy vodka,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Tasting room,
Yeah, and that's just alcohol. They don't
Right.
serve food.
Correct.
snacks.
They had some-
They'll have like nuts
They had
and
some
stuff.
snacks and hors d'oeuvres,
But-
but that's about it. You can get like a cheese tray.
But that's food.
That's,
I mean,
Yeah.
that's not just drinking.
You know,
I wouldn't have a problem if somebody wanted to open a bar and not serve any.
I don't
food.
think you want to start parsing all this stuff up.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, the purpose of zoning today is to try to make it a little bit more generalized. Get rid of the specificity on everything. A lot of ordinances have it as eating and drinking establishments.
I just think
Period.
simpler is
Period.
better.
Yeah.
I
You know.
yeah. Because it causes us, the city, a lot of angst to sort out who's what, and a lot of regulation, a lot of enforcement that is really for naught in a lot of times, you know, it just it makes everybody's job harder. And what are we really worried about? I mean, you know, if somebody wants a glass of wine and peanuts, or they want a glass of wine and no peanuts, I don't really care. You know, that doesn't really matter to me. And we've got laws to cover if they get drunk and get in their car and drive. That's a whole different issue. So I think simpler is better. I think we
I think
need to
simpler is
group
better
some of
and-
these things together.
Tilts a little bit towards making it easier to do business, and start a business.
And basically in B1, B2 and CBD, any of those commercial type things should be allowed as long as they're not a health and safety issue.
Are there any potential loopholes or stumbling blocks? The liquor licenses and the way that those work, or they're handed out or bought and sold based on changing any of that stuff?
Well, I think I'm gonna check the Liquor Control Commission definitions. I like using the definitions that they have for like micro distillery, microbrewery, so we're consistent with the state act,
Sure,
you know, so I'll just check those and then I'll,
Okay.
yeah, that'd be good.
Yeah. so we're
Make sure
consistent.
we're doing it the same.
So you'll bring us back, marked up.
Yep.
Recommendation. That's great. Okay. All right, well, I feel like we're making progress on the uses. The general theme that I heard is we're looking to simplify and to make it easier to do business while still protecting the community on important things, and getting rid of archaic language, and really making sure that we permit uses where uses already exist. And that I'm all in favor of that, so. And then, John and Jeff, thank you very much for keeping the notes straight and keeping our versions moving and flowing and all that. And we sure appreciate your advice on what the trends are and what the latest best practices are. So here we are again, approaching 7 o'clock. And we've been through the uses. And what's your pleasure? What, how should we proceed?
Do you feel like we should finish a section and then move forward, like, and see if there are corrections again, and then go on to the next section?
Well, it's fresh.
Yeah, and then, yeah, stick with one thing that we're all like
Yeah.
continually talking about, and then move on to the next section.
And then we've got some pretty meaty stuff to do in terms of the some
Dimensional.
big choices regarding, lot sizes, density and that kind of thing. And what we've lined up and that you all responded to is John's been nice enough to offer to put on a seminar for us on Saturday,
28th,
the
right?
28th of January from 9:30 till about, what did I say?
Mhm.
Noon. 9:30. And we're gonna talk about zoning trends and Michigan Planning Association has put together some toolkit on recommendations to modernize zoning. And we're gonna learn about those. So that will feed our work when we get into that section and give us a foundation for it. But in the meantime, I'd say if you all are willing to come back in essentially, a month for another off-cycle special meeting to let's keep hammering away at the uses and get that nailed down. And then John can advise us where we go next. Yeah, sound good? So that, if we
What
were,
would the date be on
yeah,
that?
I was just gonna check. It looks like February 2nd.
Yep, that would be the first Thursday in February.
Same time? Thursday night, 5:30?
It's ground all day.
Is that okay with,
Which is what some of these meetings feel like. So it's completely apropos.
That's fine.
all right, that's great. And then our next regular meeting is 2 weeks from tonight. And sounds like we're gonna be taking some more input on short-term rentals. And we looked at focus that meeting, we've heard a lot. And try to answer the 4 key questions for council, and give them a recommendation. We'll see if we're ready to do that, or if we're not. And we don't have any other applications or anything, Jeff, from residents?
No, at this time, no. So what we will do though, our January meeting, we do. So that'll all be potentially congealed into one document. Trying to think, and we need to then elect our new chair for the new year. So I think that's most of everything, unless anybody has any other housekeeping things that they would like me to bring to the meeting.
Are you guys gonna check the bylaws against whatever the state statute is for planning? I can't remember the name.
Yeah, and that's generally where Jim Raymer will
Yeah,
come
'cause there
in
was-
if
there was
if there's
some things that
updates
didn't
to the
match.
Michigan Zoning Enabling Act or
Yeah.
Planning Enabling Act. We update those, as things come through.
Great.
Great. All right, any other business members would like to suggest? All right, then this meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.
This is one of.